the plan gave recommendations on how to answer that. Now the interesting thing was that the development partners that are active in the Mekong Delta and assist the Vietnamese government there, they were worried about the sensibility sometimes of the investments that they were asked to finance. And they wanted to see, in the longer term, would their investments contribute to the survival of the Delta, yes or no? And therefore, thinking that the Mekong Delta Plan asked the right questions, it gave the right suggestions to the government, development partners were very positive about it. Because development partners were very positive about it, it became also very valuable for the Vietnamese government. So that when it was presented in 2013, development partners, actually by way of Victoria Kwakwa of the World Bank, the country director, now vice president, issued a statement in support of the plan, and the plan was therefore afterwards embraced also by Prime Minister. So we've had various meetings afterwards, I'm not going to go into it. But now I think 2 years afterwards, there's a great acceptance of the general recommendations of the plan. One of the results, there are actually quite a few development partners that, together with the Vietnamese government, use the Mekong Delta Plan as a reference point to devise projects in the Delta that should help the long-term sustainable development. The biggest of these is a loan that's being prepared by the World Bank, about $400 million over 6 years. The figures here are not exactly correct, but it's approximately right. Now, the problem is that, let's say at a policy level, there's a general acceptance of the recommendations and what they would mean. For instance, and this relates to the problems that we've just been speaking about, and just to focus on those problems, this, of course, the drought this year and the salinity intrusion this year was a disaster that was gonna happen. One day, this would happen. It happens to be this year, but 3 years ago, we knew that this was going to happen. We just didn't know exactly when. And we also know that it's going to happen again. So, in relation to the Mekong Delta Plan, the humanitarian issue this year, how terrible it is, that's very, very important. That's what, for instance, the UN is working on. That's not what concerns us so much. What concerns us is, how can we avoid that this happens again 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 13 years from now, 14 years from now. So, at an ever-increasing rate. After all, from an economic perspective, that people suffer this year is acceptable if next year and the year after and the year after they have a big profit. So the bad years balance out the good years, or are balanced out basically by the good years, so that in the end, at the bottom line, you have a positive value. Then people can live under those kind of circumstances. But if the system changes and the bad years become more prominent, occur more often, then they have a negative at the bottom. This is what's happening in the Mekong Delta, and therefore things need to change. Now, the Delta has been developed over the last 20, 30 years very drastically, very efficiently, very successfully, but it's reached the limits of its carrying capacity. The system is changing, and now we go on the backswing. So, what do we need to do? The problem is that, and this is very used, it happens same in the Netherlands, same everywhere in the world. There is a tendency to try to stick with what we know. So we need changes of land use, we need change of cropping, and so on. Even if we understand the kind of changes that we want to make, that we need to make, we'll try to postpone them. There are more urgent things this year, so let's worry about the possibility of drought in the Mekong Delta next year. And next year we have a different problem. Nothing is happening in the Delta, so we postpone it till the year after, until the disaster strikes. So, In relation to the very good project proposals that are being developed in the Mekong Delta under the World Bank loan, one of the issues that the World Bank faced is that there is a tendency for the departments with which they work to come up with project proposals that were already in existence. This is not surprising because everybody needs to act real quickly. We're going to prepare a loan, has to go to the board next year. Can we please have your sub-project proposals? If you start from scratch, you're not going to make the time. So you start with project proposals that you already had. But those project proposals were developed before we knew what the actual needs of the Delta are. So in the discussions of what you're going to do, you run the risk that you stick with business as usual, even if you understand that you need to change. So, the challenges towards implementation for the Mekong Delta Plan or for a sustainable strategy of the Delta. Paradigm shift requires policy change. So you understand that you need to start acting in the Delta in a different way. You need to adjust your policies. As soon as you understand that, you will run into the forces that have that benefit from what is happening at the moment, the way the Delta is functioning now. Anybody who is investing in rice will not be happy if there's a shift away from rice, unless so benefits themselves. So that's one of the issues. Therefore, old ways die slowly. The institutional arrangements in the Delta, they do not support integrated and long-term planning. And this is a major issue. Actually, when the Mekong Delta Plan was formulated in 2013, when it was presented to the government, we had advice on the governance that was needed. But it was so difficult to put that into politically correct wording at the time that we left out that chapter. We did discuss it though. But now, if you go to a meeting on Mekong Delta Plan and planning, there is no problem for anybody, whether in the government or in the provinces, to say we need to adjust our planning process and we need to adjust the way that we work on regional coordination. There is now a Prime Ministerial position on this, and MPI is working on this. So we're making big progress there. And why is this necessary? Because the upstream Delta provinces have different problems than the ones downstream. And some of the solutions for the downstream provinces need to be found upstream, or can be solved upstream, and vice versa. So you cannot solve the problems in the Delta in isolation. You can only solve them, the kind of problems that you've just shown us, by looking at the whole. And to give one example, recently, I don't know if some of you know Professor Steven of Technical University Delft. Of course, trying to do. He was asked to visit Kienzan, one of the severely drought-affected areas. And they discussed their various ways of dealing with the drought in Kienzan. And one of the solutions would be to dig a canal, connect to the Mekong, and just bring 600 cubic meters of water per second to Kienzan. Problem solved. Great for Kienzan, but all the downstream provinces would suffer terrible salinity intrusion. So you cannot look at these things in isolation. You really have to work with all the provinces together to find the optimal solution. And also you have to realize that some of the provinces are going to lose out anyway. They need to be compensated for that. All their land use and their productivity as it is structured now will need to change. Anyway,